Hello everyone, welcome to today's Health Talks about rising funding. My name is Otto Olavinen and I'm the co-founder of Health Design and the CEO of Northbay, agency helping to communicate and market research and innovation. At Health Design, we believe that by bringing health design and tech communities together, we can move towards a better future for human well-being. Health Design is a yearly event around the ideas for improving public and individual health. In addition, we have been having this health startup pitching competition with Instrumentaremme Science Foundation, and we have been having close to 50 pitches so far. So this is also my introduction to the topic. And but today we are not going to hear so much pitches, but we are going to get insights from the following startups: Sartar Therepeutics, Surgify, and Askel Healthcare. Let me introduce you to our first panelist. He is the CEO and co-founder of Surgify, a Finnish startup company making bone surgery safe. His passion is to solve healthcare problems by implementing modern technology. Before co-founding Surgify Medical, he worked as a neurosurgery researcher at Helsinki University Hospital. He has been chosen as one of the 35 innovators under 35 in Europe by MIT Technology Review, and is also a Kairos Society member. He plays piano and flies a Diamond DA-40 light aircraft in his free time. Oh, that's very cool. Please welcome Sippola.
Thank you, everybody.
And then let's go to our next one. So our next panelist is the co-founder and chairman of the board of Sartar Therepeutics. He's a biochemist and a university researcher who got his PhD in 2012 and whose research has focused on the biomarkers and cancer therapy targets nearly 20 years. Sartar was founded in 2016 based on academic research funding, and last November the company raised a round of 2.3 million euros by crowdfunding to speed up its operations towards clinical studies. Besides his two duties in Sartar, he has a research group in the University of Helsinki, which aims to find novel therapy targets and therapeutics to rare cancers such as sarcomas. Please welcome Harri Sihto.
Thank you.
And our final panelist is the CEO and co-founder of Askel Healthcare, a medical device company dedicated to rebuilding cartilage tissue to prevent joint pain. She holds a doctorate in orthopedic cell biology. She's a passionate entrepreneur who gets excited when academic research results find their way out of the lab. She's also one of the founding members and a longtime board member of the Entrepreneurial Society of University of Helsinki, Helsinki Think Company. Currently, she serves as the chairman of the board of Tissue Cure Alliance in Finland and a member of the board of the Finnish Research Impact Foundation. In her free time, she goes out with her dog and enjoys a variety of martial arts. Please welcome Virpi Muhonen.
Hi everyone, great to be here today.
Okay, so let us start. So let's start with Virpi. Take us to the beginning. Why did you start your company? And where did you get your initial funding?
Well, we kind of had to start the company. It's based on the research results and the excellent research results we actually gained. So my background is in stem cell biology and in orthopedics, and I did majority of my career first in science, and then during I would say 7 years of really kind of devoted research to finding novel biomaterials for cartilage repair in the University of Helsinki, we actually gained excellent results. And then with my co-founder Anne-Mari Hauparanta, who was working in the Tampere Technical University at that point, we kind of realized that the results are so exciting and there's actual huge unmet medical need that we actually could be solving at least partially. We decided that we just have to start a company. There's no way around it basically, and nobody will do it if we don't do it. So it was really based on the scientific results, and that was, let's say, 4 years ago already. Yes, so time flies. So, and then basically, well, when we started the company, we didn't know anything about kind of like running a company, because both of our backgrounds in the science. So we really were kind of thinking at the first time in our life that where do we actually get funding for a company? We have been raising funding from the research, but now with the company, it was completely new thing. And then we were lucky that we had this family, friends, and full Axel that actually were able to give €100,000 kind of a seed investment in the beginning that came from our kind of family friend. And then we were able to raise the 50,000 from the Business Finland Tempo. And that's how we started.
Okay, very good. So you got some support from the family and friends. So let's see, yes. How was it for the other panelists? So Harri, can you take us to the beginning of the Sartar Therepeutics, and how did you raise your first funding?
So history goes back to 2012 when I get my first PhD student, and we were studying potential therapy targets for a rare gastrointestinal tumor called KIT. And we found out that one protein called phosphodiesterase 3A enzyme was extremely highly expressed in these tumors. And one drug that targets this protein was very efficacious in cell line models. And that was quite obvious for us that this is really important finding, because this tumor has good therapies available, but most of the tumors become resistant for these therapies eventually. And well, the university was not interested about our innovation, so we went to the Finnish Foundation of Innovation. Back then we know nothing about business, we were academic researchers, and they help us to look novelty of the invention, help patent application, make a market evaluation and a regulatory survey. So I could say that they gave us a foundation of our company. They show us that yes, we have really commercial potential, or idea which have commercial potential, and also show us direction that what we have to do to make product. And we continued our academic studies and showed that the drug is also efficacious in animal models. And in 2016, it became time that we have to found company to get funding, because international patent application, which cost a lot, their deadline was in back then. And I could say that we have two godfathers, Juha Arvala, CEO of Institute of Helsinki University Central Hospital, and Pasi Sorvisto, director of Spark Finland, who helped us back then to find the company loan that enable us to pay these patent costs. And this is pretty much how our company started. It took a few years, and like Virpi's case, we had to make a company or found a company that we could take this idea to the clinic. Okay,
so we have family and friends, and we have loans from the right sources. So how about Visa? Can you tell about why did you start the company and how did you get the funding?
You know, I agree actually with both Harri and Virpi about this point of needing to start the business to actually get it to the clinics. So the origin of Surgify is in a way also in research, because I was a PhD student. I was studying various neurosurgical diseases, and during that time I saw many of these procedures myself as well. So head, neck, and spine surgeries, and they had almost all of them had one thing in common, which were surgical drills that were quite scary and did cause quite a lot of trouble also during those procedures. And there were also a couple of occasions where the complications were, as a matter of fact, life-threatening as well. And that led us to, thinking about this issue. I had some connections at Aalto University. So my friend was actually looking for a master's topic in mechanical engineering, and we decided to give it a shot. So making a safer surgical drill. And after making some prototypes, we had some pretty promising results. And it became self-evident that the company had to be established to bring it further. So there's no way, you can actually make a really significant impact until someone takes it commercial. I would even say so. The first funding came from Business Finland. So I think Virpi, you had this as well back in the days, but this is the Tutli funding that we got, which is something meant to transfer university research to an actual business. And that was a really turning point for us. When we applied for that financing, I would say that we ourselves, we thought that the probability was pretty low of getting it, to be honest. But we did work on it quite a lot. We got valuable help from Aalto University and also HUS. And that was our first application. And I would say that that project also in part led to us getting our first private funding from investors.
Continuing from that, Visa, so you mentioned that you got a lot of support from Aalto University. So how was it in the beginning? Do you feel like you had good knowledge of the different ways to get funding?
No, not at all. We started from zero. We actually applied for many research grants in the beginning, and I don't think it was too far ago that the previous negative decisions came back. So it wasn't something to apply for a research grant. That became pretty clear. So it was too applied. It was too practical. Somehow, it's funny that it's in some contexts a negative thing, but in applying for those foundations and research, it can be. So we didn't have any knowledge. We tried the public, or these kind of research grants many times without success. And then when we turned to business, things started to move forward.
Okay, so that's good to hear that you got, first was a bit rough, but you got it started and you have been gaining knowledge ever since.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Just to remind our audience, we have a chat window and a Q&A window. So preferably with the Q&A window, you are free to leave some questions for our panelists, and we will try to answer those by the end of the event. So feel free to do so. And please also specify if you have questions for specific panelists or maybe for all of them. So what about Harri? What was your knowledge about the funding landscape when you first started?
No, it was zero. So it was learning by doing, meeting angels and VCs in events and getting feedback. And it was learning by doing in practice.
And what about Virpi?
I'm completely in the same level as Harri and Visa, so no prior experience. I didn't know anything about business funding. I literally Googled equity funding, convertible loan, what does that mean? So really from the scratch. And in our case, it's actually that kind of seeking that we went through that, how can we actually fund this company? That was of course the big question. Even though we got the angel and the Business Finland tempo, that only carried us a few months, basically. So we were in a quite hurry to get new funding, and then we just started going through different options, literally Googling the different options, and that's how we actually ended up with the crowdfunding. So we started from nothing, basically.
So you mentioned that you had very little runway in your company in the beginning. So how did you deal with that kind of stress, and what do you think about this? Maybe let's ask, like, does this, let's say, bootstrapping approach, is it even possible in the healthcare startup? And how did you manage the funding in the beginning to make it go as long as possible?
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. I don't think you can bootstrap a medical device or pharma company, because we have tens of thousands running expenses every month. So it's not the case. So it's all the time you're kind of running out of the money. I think that's a typical startup life. So you just kind of get used to that. But in a way, if your background is in research, you're already used to that. So researchers all the time has to apply their own funding, and they're all the time running out of funds. So it's business as usual in that sense. So if you are a researcher and you already can handle that, go ahead to the business life. You will tackle that. You just reach out to different places basically, but it's generally the same. But how do we actually manage it was that, as I said, we got the like 150,000 altogether in the beginning. That was like March 2017. And by the summer, we were already thinking that, okay, we only have money until the autumn and we need to get more. So it was basically just really going through the different options and trying to figure out that what might be good for us, because we basically only had the story and a long path kind of ahead of us. So in that moment, it made most sense just to turn to crowdfunding, and that was the right choice actually, when I look at it now after 4 years. But there's always pros and cons in different funding, but it's just trying to figure out that what options you have and what you can actually kind of, you cannot choose all of them basically. There's always different scenarios with the company. So, but funding it's so, the burn rate is high. So you don't get anywhere with 50,000 or something like that.
Okay. What about Harri? How have you managed to extend your runway in the beginning, and how have you been able to do that? So please tell us.
Yeah, I counted recently that I have been contacted something like 110 different investors, VC or angels, on area of the health science investments. And I was banging my head about 2 years to the wall, and there was no crack at all in the wall. And feedback was that we were a little bit too early stage. We couldn't take our invention further because university was not involved, so we couldn't apply this kind of totally funding or anything. So only way to get forward to get so-called preclinical proof of concept for our drug product was to put money to the company by ourselves. So we made the first round by our founders, and then my friends invested to company. We were able to reformulate our drug, and then next year we make other small round to verify functionality of the product in pharmacokinetic studies in China. And we finally get our proof of concept for the drug product. And after that, we apparently became the right stage for the investments. And last November, we raised this 2.3 billion euros about the crowdfunding like a platform of Springvest. So that's how we have collected money, little by little. That is, I think it's a little bit problem in Finland that you have to get forward very small sums, and for example, we couldn't pay salaries or anything. So in practice, I have doing 2 work at the same time, long time.
And what about Visa? How has it been for you to make the money last since from the beginning?
Well, I think that honestly, the secret in our case is that, we're still a pretty junior team, so we can do it a bit more easily. But, I think that the goal might not necessarily, at least from my perspective, be to make it last, you know, as long as possible. I mean, of course, you try to reach certain milestones. And just to keep in mind that sometimes you can reach them faster by spending money a bit faster. So I wouldn't maybe consider it like time basis, but like milestone basis, that how can you reach certain like milestone with X amount of funding. And of course, I mean, monetary efficiency is one of the, you know, holy grails somehow of business management overall. But you know, I think that you need to choose yourself also. How do you want to do it? So if you want to go with an all-in approach, so, you know, somehow you like spend money faster, and then of course you increase the risk of the company, but you might increase the valuation, sometimes even interest of the investors, or you do it in a bit slower way. And there is no, you know, and then keep on looking for investments over a long period of time. There's no right or wrong answer, in my opinion, to this. It depends on your risk appetite. It depends on what kind of goals you set for the company. But generally speaking, like increasing the risk level might also increase the like potential outcome. So in that sense, I would say that we have like for the product development part, we have taken like I would say like optimized the risks a bit. So we have kept the monetary spending pretty low. And I think there was also a question about like how to reach these technical milestones even in the very beginning, and you know, where to get funding for that. I would say that you even might need to find ways to reach some proof of concept without any funding at all. So thinking of some ways to do that. And naturally, in some cases, it's not possible. So what we actually did is that we applied for this kind of pre-seed financing, small pre-seed financing from Aalto University. Okay, small in this context meant 20K. And that was our very first funding, even before the Business Finland financing I mentioned in my opening speech. But I don't think, you know, there's a right or wrong answer to this. But I also can say I agree with Harri that you need to contact a fairly large number of investors to get any kind of investment. It takes time, especially if you started from scratch. You can easily prepare to like 1 year to build some kind of investor network so that you can get funding with good terms. I'm not in a way expert on these crowdfunding possibilities, but I can at least say that private like angel investors and venture capital investors, it takes time, it takes months, potentially even more than a year when you start the process.
So let's turn to the question of investors. Many times we have a discussion about what investors are looking in a startup, but let's turn it the other way around. So what are you looking when you are thinking about where to find investors? Are you mainly concerned about getting funding, or are you also thinking about how to get inside advice from the investors as well? And let's start with Virpi on this one.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it depends on the stage of the company also. Especially in the beginning, it might be that you only need the funding just to get going. And typically the funds you're raising in the beginning are smaller. So that doesn't include like board seats and different kind of positions of power in the company. But the later you go, I would say we are in that stage at the moment, raising the pre-A round. We're raising 3 million at the moment. So at that stage, we definitely are now looking for more industry-specific investors, and we are looking a lot about the brain power they can bring. So it's not anymore about bringing the money to carry out the operations and reach those milestones. I like what Visa says about the milestones, and I fully agree. It's not saving the money; it's growing the value of the company with the money, because that's That's what you need to get. That's something you need to do in order to raise the next round. So it's always about kind of growing the value. But it depends on the stage of the company and your needs. But I would say, of course, it always helps if your investor also knows something about the field, has connections, can help you in the later rounds also. So these are highly important factors. And of course, if you're raising like 3 million, that typically comes in a board seat or at least some position of power in the company. So of course, the company needs to carefully select that what's the best investor for the company, because it's a two-way street all the time. So definitely money and brain power. That's important.
Okay, so what about Harri? How do you see this question?
Well, in our case, major funding came through the crowdfunding. So we have 400 owners in the company, and that we don't know. So I can say that it does bring us any brain power. So in our case, it's more like funding to get through preclinical phase of the company. Mm-hmm. And all this brain power has come from different kinds of networks and incubators and accelerators and so on.
Can you tell more about the experience with these incubators and accelerators?
Yeah, we were in that sense lucky that when we started the company, Life Science Accelerator of Turku started back then, and we get into the first batch, and also Spark Finland mentoring program started back then, and we were in first batch in that program also. So both of these programs really helped us to do networks. It was much easier to contact experts and investors and so on when somebody introduces you, when you are an unknown person. So, and it has, all this program has given a lot of visibility also abroad. We have been visiting in California in big events, pitching there, and from London to Kyoto to San Francisco and so on. So I think that the biggest role of these Finnish accelerators and incubators has been contacts, and now we are in a health incubator in Helsinki. And just to mention that we were also in Portuguese, how you say it, mentoring program called Health Tech Tap, and that was really excellent program because there was real big pharma mentors who gave us comments and so on. So it's about networks for us.
So, Visa, how do you see the relationship between the money and the maybe mentorship and advice?
I think it's really important. So, you know, the fact that we had Business Finland investing in the beginning helped to bring us some investors in the seed round. And the fact that those investors that we brought in the seed round were credible, I think helped us to raise the next funding round as well. Now, I would also want to give in a bit of a warning in here. So there are many investors who state that they are the top experts in the field, and because of this, you need to give them half of the company. So also, I mean, it's, you know, sometimes I think in the Nordics, you know, we might be a bit blue-eyed when it comes to business. So beware of this, always get references, you know, but think about the big picture. So if there is really a well-known investor, it will help us, or a good investor, it will help us you in the next step. I can almost guarantee that. So I could actually, I think I could at the same time try to answer a couple of these questions in here in this chat box from our perspective. But Surgify did contact both angel investors and venture capital investors. This is a bit different type of money. We got this venture capital on board quite early. I think it might have been a pretty good choice. But on the other hand, we also got some angel investors still in the previous round. So we have had a mix of these always. I would say that angel investors, generally speaking, are really good at like joining your board, providing networks, those kind of things in the industry and to customers. Whereas venture capital investors are very good at negotiating, and this can actually help you when you negotiate with new investors. And they can also introduce you to some fellow venture capital investors. But for the angel investors, it depends like where you. So for example, in FIBAN, you usually get smaller investors. But if you need bigger funding rounds, I would say that go abroad as early as you can. Also, half of our investments came from abroad, and I think that brings value to the company. So at the same time, you get like a international perspective and networks, because in Finland we have many times top-notch research. We value excellency and these kind of things, but there are some skills that you can learn from investors that come from outside Finland. And networking in any ways, even in Finland, increases the chances of you also broadening your international networks. And I also recommend participating to events in Finland and abroad if possible.
We have some questions from the chat. Maybe we can take a few of those. The most upvoted question so far is, for raising initial funding, there is a need for a proof of concept if the idea is still in the research phase. But how to get funding for the initial proof of concept? Kind of a chicken egg problem, how to handle this. So who wants to start to answer this question? Maybe Harri?
Well, I actually told already our story that we, the founders, invested the company and then my friends. Mm-hmm. So that's how we get forward little by little. Of course, if we would have some angel investor, we wouldn't have need to use 2 years or more to make a proof of concept. But that was our pathway.
I can say on our side, so basically because the idea for the company came from the research background, and we were lucky that at the same time when we started to kind of think a bit that, hey, might there be a business option here, or how can we handle this? There was the Business Finland Tutli funding, so the commercialization fund that is targeted for research groups. So that was an excellent kind of thing for us, because we were able to still continue in the university, but start thinking about the commercialization path to further research and really prove the proof of concept. So we did a large animal study and these things that would cost quite a lot if you would do it in the company. So of course it depends on the company that what is the proof of concept and what kind of data you need to prove that. In our case, it's an expensive set of data. So we were able to actually continue in the university for 2 years with this Tutli funding. We got actually 2 Tutli fundings. So we were more ready to start the company after that. We already had the proof of concept and the idea that how do we actually continue and then raising the funding. So we utilized the research funding in our case.
Can you tell a little bit more about how do you see this? Like, when is the right time to transition from the university research project into a startup, and how do you kind of manage this transition from the university to the startup?
Well, that's, of course, every case is different, and in our side it was pretty easy because we really didn't have anything to transfer for the university, so it was quite kind of a clear cut in that sense, that we basically just started the company and brought few people with us from the university that were expert on the manufacturing side. And in our case, because because our product is actually manufactured in our own premises, and we started to build the manufacturing unit straight in the beginning. So that's why we had this really high burn rate. So raising the money was the issue from the beginning, and raising a lot of money from the beginning. So in our case, we really had to think that, okay, now we have enough proof to kind of go forward. Now it's the time to start a company. And then it just has been fundraising for ever since, and trying to build it, like Misa said, like from small streams, because there's no way that a starting company can raise 10 million in the first day, because your valuation just doesn't match. So it's all the time, little by little, raising the valuation and getting more funding and building on those milestones. But for us, it was carrying through as long as we could with the university background, because that enabled us to do the really important proof of concept.
And did you also apply for EU funding, or like Horizon 2020 or similar grants?
We are now actually in a Horizon 2020 research consortia, so we did that as a company, and now we are actually applying. That's a good comment, because I think for a startup you should always look not just equity funding, you need to also secure the dilution in a way, so always look for grants and loans. There's excellent sources for that. I would definitely encourage everybody to look at the Horizon Europe framework and seek this EIC accelerator and other grants that they are available. We are now applying the 2.5 million grants, so they are huge grants. So try to be kind of flexible with the funding, secure yourself from the dilution too early, but have the good partners in the equity side, and also trying to have like Business Finland pilot loans or these grants. So there are multiple sources of raising funding, and I think every company has to think that what works best, and what do you want to reach, and what is your kind of long-term plan, what's your exit plans and everything. So always look like miles and miles ahead where you actually want to be in 5 years or 10 years, and build on that.
What about Visa? Have you been recently active in those research type funding, and what do you think about those that are like grant-based funding, for example?
Yeah, we have so we received this phase 1 funding recently, actually from European Union, and we're now applying for the new grant. Now, just keep in mind, I mean, that the likelihood, and we realize this also, is extremely low for getting actually those. I mean, the percentage is super low, but I would say that it's worth the risk, because the upside is so like high. You need to spend time, and I mean, you need to spend considerably time and money, but I think it's worth it for certain type of companies, and medtech and biotech companies definitely belong to that category. Apart from this Horizon, I think like many of these questions are somehow apparently related to how to get the very first funding, and that's, you know, I would say probably a question in anyone's mind if like you're starting the company, and what I would like say regarding to that, partly related to maybe these Horizon fundings as well, is that for all of these alternatives, where it's private, public, angel, VC, etc., Horizon or Business Finland, the bottom line is that they want to see something. So they want to see as much as possible, you know, what you have achieved, what you already have. So make no mistake, none of these fundings is about like, okay, I have this idea and I need financing to make it happen. But it's about, okay, what do you have already done? So, you know, so you can get some funding to make it even bigger. So that's how it works, even the very early stage and first funding. So for any of these, you know, you have to have something, you know, in your back pocket to show. And the more you have, if you have customers, I think there was a question about customer, even for the Horizon grants, in some sense, actually, it might help. You know, if you have some traction, at least with the customers, definitely for private fundings, but in medtech that rarely happens. So whatever you can have, patents or provisional patents, prototypes, research results, statements from potential customers, connections abroad, all of those help. Whatever you can like scrape up, utilize it in fundraising, even for the very first funding.
Great tips, Visa. So what about Harri? Like, how do you see these grants?
Well, definitely it's good to get non-diluting funding, but in our case, for example, we had so little money that we couldn't use to lever any funding. For example, if you think about Business Finland Tempo funding, you should have at least person who are working whole time. And in our case, all the funding went to do research, so we couldn't pay the salaries. So we were a little bit this kind of situation that we need to get funding to get funding. So, but definitely I'm pro for non-diluting funding. And we will, of course, also now when we made our seed funding round successfully, we'll start to look these other funding instruments that are available, like SME funding or is it accelerator funding these days, and so on.
We already talked about angels and VCs, so let's go a little bit to the other direction. So both Virpi and Harri have experience of raising money from like a large group of investors. So let's start with, let's continue with Harri. What has been your experience and what are the like drawbacks and benefits of raising money from like a bigger group of investors?
Yeah, many people warned us that if we use crowdfunding, it might be difficult to raise funding on the next round for clinical trials. But I'm not so sure about that. We have seen that other drug companies has also done this kind of rounds and second rounds by crowdfunding. Virpi have very good experience about crowdfunding and so on. My experience is that it was really efficient way to collect funding. It was 3 weeks after kickoff meeting with Springvest, we had raised 2.3 million euros. So I'm quite happy about this experience, I have to say. And compared to the fact that I went through around the world looking VCs for the company, 2 years, met some people in different years again. They followed our progress, but nothing happens. And problem, of course, was that we couldn't find the anchor investor from Finland that would entice some other investors to Europe, for example, to invest us. So my experience from crowdfunding has been very good. I mentioned earlier that, of course, we could progress faster if we could find some angel investor in early stage. But on the other hand, we have also matured as a company during the process.
What about Virpi? Like, would you like to continue on this topic?
Yeah, sure. So in our case, because we were past 4 months after funding a company when we were already running out of the money, the angel and the Tempo grant, and we realized that with our kind of milestones and the burn rate related, we cannot carry on with angel investments, and also quite quickly understood that we are not VC ready either. So we were really looking for that, what other options we have, and then we really started to look into the crowdfunding, and I'm happy that we actually did, because we went to a partner with investor, and in our case it was from the start of this discussion with investor around, I would say it was 4 months until we got the round closed. And now we have actually run 2 crowdfunding rounds. And because of that, we have a really large cap table with over almost 700 owners. But we had the same kind of story than Harri said, that everybody kind of warned us that it's hard to handle and VCs won't invest in you anymore. And that hasn't been the truth. And actually we kind of started to think that, okay, there are hundreds of people who actually believe in what we are doing. There are individuals who have invested money in our company. So they are on our side. So why not to use that and kind of elaborate from that? So we have actually been communicating with this vast network in monthly newsletters. We use a platform to actually reach out to them and have them all the news and whatever is happening in the company. And we have these virtual coffee sessions once a quarter. So we really have kind of established a Askel network of investors. And actually last autumn, we raised $500,000 from this group within a month. So it's really a strength for us. And with now the discussions with the early stage VCs with this pre-A round, it hasn't been a problem. They have a separate shareholder agreement. And of course, there's complexity, but it's not stopping the process. And for us, it has been a good choice because there really wasn't anything else that could have funded us in that level that we needed to actually reach the next milestones. And I would say in general in funding, you need to don't be fixated that, hey, this is the right way to do it. I need to get this VC and then this. So kind of look around, and there's no right or wrong in this case. You just need to understand that what are your goals actually, and what do you need to reach to get to the next level. So it's case by case every time.
I think this is a great lesson also for our audience, that there is really no one right way to raise funding, and there are multiple different options available. And I think it also points to the fact that there are maybe those kind of preconceptions in the startup area, that people think that there is this, you should do this, you shouldn't do this. And actually, maybe this also goes to the point that like, if you now know what you know now, would you have done something differently? Is there some kind of things that maybe you had a preconception and you think that you shouldn't or should do like this, and now you understand that there is another way? So do you have anything to add on this, or did you already have all that you wanted to say on this, Virpi?
Well, of course, if we have been kind of starting from zero knowledge and been doing this now 4 years, we have learned a lot. So there are many things I would do differently, but I wouldn't kind of put too much emphasis on that, because that's how it goes. If you knew everything, then this would be easy. So that's just the way it goes. So don't kind of punish yourself on the mistakes you made, just learn from them. But in kind of, if I look what I have been doing and how I've been communicating and what has been my kind of how I try to lure the VCs in the past years, and so I would change kind of in a way, be more confident. I would say to myself past 4 years that, hey, you know how to do it, that it doesn't matter that you don't know, you will learn, and kind of just be confident on what you do. And I emphasize on the milestones. So you need to understand, especially if you're the CEO of the company, that what do you actually want to happen in the next year or the next 2 years, and kind of make clear milestones. And of course, also you need to always be flexible. There might be like pandemics coming and stuff that you don't know, but it's more or less kind of like trust your vision and just be open, have a dialogue, discuss with as many people as you can, and you get feedback, listen to that feedback, learn from that feedback, and just kind of enjoy the ride. It has been excellent 4 years. It has been tough, but I wouldn't go back. So it's all about learning and being open to learn more.
Excellent point. So Harri, do you have something to add on this? That are you satisfied with how things went, and would you have done something differently?
Well, I second Virpi in everything. And but of course, when we started from zero, we didn't know how hard pathway we will have. So later on, it seems quite obvious that we should have invested by ourselves earlier for the company and get things go forward. But this has been a learning process. We are learning every day something new, and we have to, because there's always some new challenges in the startup.
And what about Visa?
Yeah, I think great points, and I would also say that don't like overthink, as in a way that what is lying ahead, because it's tough, but don't overthink it. Otherwise, you won't do it. It requires some level of visionarism and even being a bit naive, but it helps you to start the company and go forward, and the learning curve is extremely steep. Regarding maybe like one of the key learnings from myself, also coming from academia, I would say that I really underestimated the business side of everything in the beginning. So I started from like, okay, it's, just let's start a company to get some funding for this and stuff, to, discussing with the investors, having some kind of business plan, and then thinking about, okay, why are they so critical about all of the things we are saying? And then just realizing that they are right after all. And, this like business side of things, and also making a lasting impact to the clinical world is significant. Try to be interested in it, realize what kind of potential it has, to make things better for everybody.
Great. I think we are getting at the end of our discussion. I think this time maybe Visa was already doing this earlier, so I can maybe ask him to do it again. So Visa, if you want, could you pick a question from the audience, from the Q&A chat, and answer that, and I will let my cat out to the balcony because it's been complaining all the time. So can you do that?
I think there's one question which is pretty good. Like, why is it so difficult to raise money from investors? Like, I mean, that's a good general question. Why is it? I would like to think that after all, it's about yourself. So, there is a huge, amount of competition out there. There are a lot of people with ideas. And the investors, get like tens, hundreds, some of them thousands of companies every year that ask for money. And the primary thing that they have to trust on is actually you when you go to them. And what you say, how you present yourself, the company, the next steps, it's about, you in the end, as the CEO, or you together with your co-founders, that have the biggest impact actually on the decision they make and how they, assess. So pay attention to this, realize that you have, the power also to determine whether you will get funding or not. And after all, it's not the investor's fault, but it's, you can really, and you should look yourself in the mirror and primarily focus on what you bring to the table, so that you get funding. But there's also tremendous potential if you realize that you have the biggest impact on this.
That's an excellent point. I would say actually on that I wouldn't say it's difficult, it's complex, and there's a difference between that. And what have helped me actually is learning that kind of when I present the company, and I present myself, of course, as Visa said, it's you're kind of you're the one who the VCs or whoever investor sees. You need to kind of be able to present the company, but also you need to kind of, for it helps on my side actually a lot, is when I think that we are not at the opposite sides of the table, we are actually wanting the same thing. So that's kind of a mentally great place to be when you discuss with the investors. You're not kind of you're not wanting different things. You want to have a company that succeeds, and you just build on that. It's a dialogue, and of course you need to learn on the feedback and improve all the time. But you need to find just the one that kind of matches with the company needs and your kind of the personality of the company, and everything it's important, and you're at the same side of the table actually. And also what I would encourage everybody is to be honest. So if you talk to an investor who knows the field and knows what you're talking about, they will see if you don't know. And there's no shame of saying that you don't know something that lies ahead. You cannot know from the beginning until the commercialization of your idea that what will happen and what you will need and how much money you need to raise. You can't know that. And so you can emphasize on the things that you understand and you have a clear plan, but on the other hand, you can say what you don't know. And I have realized that that's really actually valued, because you are looking for an investor who can kind of continue that path with you and grow the company. You will solve those problems together. So be in the same side of the table and be honest and believe in yourself. That's maybe my final comments.
And Harri, do you have something to add? That was all very tough, very good things already being said. So
well,
difficult to add on this.
Talks, and I could say one thing that consider our company is that we are working a little bit unknown area of drug development. And for example, when we first approached FIBAN, answer for us was that was a little bit also obvious that we need too much money for early stage, and other answer was that the investor doesn't understand our area, it's unknown area. So you have to find those people who knows the business area that they are keen to invest to your company and product. They have to understand the product. For example, in our case, there won't be some minimal viable product and hockey stick like growth curves. We just will have a product that works or not. And before that, we will spend millions of euros money. So it's a risk business, definitely.
I think this is excellent point to wrap up our conversation. I think I still have a few more questions to end up with, and then we can go enjoy the weekend. But before we do that, let's think about that, what you said in the end, about that taking the product to the market. How do you see that? Of course, it's a long path if you are working in the health startup area. One of the questions in the audience was about this paid pilots and stuff like that. Have some of you have experience in that area, and how long do you think it will take to take your product to the market? Maybe Harri can continue. Like, when do you see that your product could be in the market?
Well, optimal time schedule would be in 5 to 6 years. We are working with drug therapy, but it's based on the known drug that has been used to treat other disease earlier. So it's known to be safe. So that makes our pathway a little bit faster. And as we are developing therapy for disease that kills, there's a possibility for market approval already after the phase 2 trials, although phase 3 trials have to be done. So that's why we have a quite fast pathway.
What about Virpi?
Yeah, so because we are working in a class 3 medical device field, so it's an implantable device, high risk profile. So in our case, it's now we are, I would say, within a year starting the clinical trial path, and from this point it will take around 6 to 7 years to get the CE mark. But we are actually doing both US and EU pathways at the same time, so that brings a little bit an extra level of complexity. But it's all about the clinical trials and how much money and time that takes in our case. And that's the costly part. It's tens of millions and at least 5-6 years. So it's a marathon.
And Visa, do you have something to add still?
Yeah. So we are, I would say that in like considerably lower category than both Virpi and Harri. So we have actually received the CE mark recently. And we are now planning to get our first customers during this year. It has been a long process, but maybe the takeaway is that there is like a huge difference between the various types of medtech projects, and so if we haven't also paid attention to the regulatory parts in the beginning, this might have become a class 3 product, or let's say we might have thought about it as a class 3 product. I recommend to get that expertise in pretty early stage as well. But quite soon, to answer your question briefly, and to answer the question about paid pilots, I think that it depends. In Finland, the surgeons rarely ask for money if you go to do some short piloting or even some type of studies with them. But I can guarantee that if you go to the US and at some point you might want to think about that, you have to pay. That's like the starting point in there. So it depends.
And let's take us to the last question today. Unfortunately, we are not able to maybe answer all of the Q&A questions this time, but hopefully most of them got good answers today. So let's end with the question about the funding landscape. So how do you see the funding landscape has developed for medical startups in Finland? And what do you hope from the future?
It has developed a lot. I can say this. So overall, the startup landscape in Finland has developed such a significant way during the past few years. It's like, I would say, even completely different since we established the company and what it is right now, and also medical devices. So there are those accelerators, incubators, events specifically for health tech nowadays. And of course, the capital raised by startups, foreign capital raised by Finnish startups is in the top level in Europe. So it's going well at the moment. It looks bright for Finnish startups and also medtech startups. But considering this, I still recommend to, especially in medtech and drugs and those kind of like higher risk, I propose to expand your reach. In Europe, US is really difficult, to get US investors if you don't have activities in there. I would say that it might be good to focus on, primarily Nordics and then Europe as well. But I cannot name a single country, let's say, for example, where you should. I think there was a question also related to that. So this is like a pan-European business, this medtech startup investment. So there's no specific like country to go. You just need to go to the right events, and most of the important investors hopefully will be there. Regarding the corona pandemic, that's a great question, how it has changed during the past year or so. Usually these kind of like phases, when there's increased risk, it increases the interest in medical device products. So at least during the past year, I would say that the specific interest in medtech and health tech has been higher than earlier.
What about Harri? How do you see this?
I have same feelings that Visa, that this area has gone forward fast. I can see my French startups very good news all the time and so on. But on the other hand, I think that Therepeutics wrote in Turun Sanomat or something recently that in health business or drug development, we still get only quarter of that risk funding to Finnish companies that, for example, our Central European colleagues get. So we still have a pathway to collect similar funding or sums of money to the companies that our European colleagues do.
And what about Virpi?
Not so much to add. I fully agree. The funding scheme has developed a lot recently, but still, if you compare to the Scandinavian or even European startups to US, so the valuations and the ticket sizes, they are still quite different. So I would say in Europe, it's raising more rounds with a kind of a step-by-step approach compared to the US. And I wouldn't kind of be shy from looking for the US money also because of the ticket sizes and everything. It's really lucrative, especially if you're aiming to that market. But also it is really important that you have a strong local investor at a certain point, because when you look really like geographically abroad, then it is important that you have the local support, because those investors kind of rely also to that local support. So like everything, it is a step-by-step approach, and you need to kind of understand what you are building the company towards. And of course, it doesn't kind of, it's not a wrong thing to do that when you start, you just like look everywhere and get the feedback and get the kind of the comments and the ideas, because then you can build on those. So don't be shy, and it's good to go kind of seeking the biggest players in the beginning. At least you get the feedback, and when you come back with a better company in a way, you are more kind of you have more tools to actually get that deal. So I would kind of go with what Visa said, that networking and communication. I think that's the key, and communicate as boldly as you can.
Okay, I think that is a great point to end our conversation. I really want to thank all our panelists, Virpi, Harri, and Visa. This has been an excellent discussion, and I think our audience has also gotten a lot out of this, and I think they are even more ready when you started your company. So I think there's a good opportunity for starting a new company, and the future looks bright, but it is not without its challenges. So those should be expected. So just go boldly forward with your ideas and do your best to succeed. So I think this is and it's a risky business, so you need to be able to take some of that also yourself, but be like with the hopeful. So I think that's a good way to approach it. So I want to thank also our co-organizers, Aalto University, Kuopio Health, Oulu Health, Terkko Health Hub, and Upgraded Health Startup Associations. And we will be continuing our health talks. Next month is Business Finland telling about their opportunities. So please stay tuned to health talks. And I want to thank once again the panelists and also the audience for the great participation to our event. And also I want to thank the co-host, also Dovile, who's been taking care of all the technical parts today. So thank you once again, and we will see you next time. Thank you.